All right, it is now the day after the election. Had to wait all night long. I was afraid to look away from the screen because obviously, if you look away from the screen, your guy loses because the reason he's winning is because you're looking at the numbers. Your eyes tracking those numbers is what's keeping it. I was afraid to go to the bathroom. And then, of course, they wouldn't call a few states, although they didn't. It shouldn't have made a difference. It was pretty obvious what was going to happen. But given what happened before, I thought I'm going to go to sleep, wake up, and the whole thing will be reversed somehow. Oh, we got 5 million votes from, Zimbabwe, from Americans, expats or whatever. Anyway, it held. I do think it was a too big to rig scenario. Apparently, there are some states where you don't need to have voting ID, and it made a difference as far as the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, she conceded. Best speech she ever gave, because she reads well. I think she's a good hood ornament. She's a good sort of a vessel for reading. She's perfectly fine front end to something, but there's no sense of her having any core values, of any kind, which sometimes might be fine for something. I don't know for what. Certainly not for the kind of presidency that Trump has now acclimated us to, which is one where the person is actually a complete person that can talk for 3 hours on Joe Rogan and chat and wander away, which he calls it the weave. He can talk extemporaneously about this, about that, and come back to this point and go back to that point. It's what the left calls, his mental decline, but it's what normal people recognize as somebody kind of rambling a little bit, but not the way Biden would, where he's actually falling off a cliff, but because he's a talker. I can certainly relate to that. Anyway, here we are, day after, and of course everyone's breaking down what lessons do we have to learn, and the thing about it is, they could have given those conclusions before the event, which tells you something. They're not really learning anything. They're just regurgitating their own points of view. So if they are leftists that identify everything by race and gender and so forth, guess what lessons they're going to learn? They're going to say, well, the white women let us down. Or, well, I heard Sonny Hostin today say, it was the white uneducated women that let us down. And it's, the Hispanic men. They're going to go through all those categories. That's how they see the world. They see it as demographics. And it's interesting, Lichtman, the guy that has the 13 keys, it's never wrong, was wrong, which is really great. It's great, not that he's specifically wrong about this, but it's great to see when templates are shattered, when rhythms are broken, and when things that seem inevitable. I was very disheartened when he called Harris because I thought, well, he's never been wrong. That should count for something. But he seemed sort of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And that gave me some hope because I thought maybe he's skewing his model without realizing he's doing it because he's become deranged. And I do feel that way. And I can't tell if I'm in a bubble and that's why I think these people are TDS or if they are actually in the bubble. But some of the stuff seems so straight up and down to me that they really do seem like they are deranged, which of course is a, over-the-top expression on purpose. It's hyperbolic. But the point is they're not seeing straight because something about Trump has, they don't like the cut of his jib. And so they're just everything he says is going to be just like, oh, he's lying again. I can't, it's like, okay, just take a deep breath. You can't honestly be upset that a politician is lying. I mean, that doesn't even count as an objection anymore. What are you possibly talking about? We're talking about politicians. That's not high. Well, he lies more than everybody else. Okay, well, again, that's a question of quantity, not of kind. What is the difference? He's a dictator. What does that even mean? We have a system where you have to work within the system. He couldn't be a dictator if he wanted to. Well, he quotes them. He likes them. He befriends them. So what? What is that even possible? Who cares? And at that point, I just think you're looking for things because the real reason is something inchoate, something so deep that you just don't like the cut of his jib. Like I will say, I don't like the cut of Obama's jib now, even though I was a big supporter when he first came out. I've come to find him to be a Chicago hack. And therefore, I don't think there's any there. Now, I think everything he does is tactical, manipulative, and that his worldview is just sort of some odd, I don't even know what to call it, some odd quasi-modern thing. It's not really cohesive, but it's enough to make him feel like he has enough ground to criticize and wave his finger about the right and the left, white people and black people, gay and straight. And, when he first came on the scene, that was worth something, and it seemed like, he was going to be the great uniter. People forget that he genuinely was a rock star, and people actually believed, I did as well, that he would unite people. He even went so far on one of the debates to literally refer to his mixed race existence as justification. He said it out loud of his own mouth, that it was in his DNA to see both sides. And the very first thing he did is had that beer summit with Biden and that police officer and his friend Gates that had been arrested breaking into his own house because the officer didn't realize that he was, it was his house because he was climbing over the fence or whatever in some rich neighborhood, which was supposed to be symbolic of he can bridge things. But now in retrospect, it looks like his way of bridging things wasn't so much to take one side or the other, which is what Trump does. But it's also not to really find common ground. It's something more like Kamala would do, which is why I think Obama had such an affinity for her. It's a sort of okay, everyone, okay. All right now, okay. Everyone, let's just settle down. Let's all just calm down. Now, tell me what you think. Which, that tone, to me, is not conducive to compromise. I'm already irritated because it's a passive-aggressive style. Just because it's passive doesn't make it any less aggressive. It's a very controlling, bureaucratic, sort of a Karen type of way of trying to pacify in order to sort of push down what otherwise might be explosive feelings or objections and just paper over things. And to me, that's not compromise. That's just don't, upend the apple cart. Let's just agree to disagree. And then we part. And that's what happened, interestingly, because it ended up being a great symbol of his failure. That beer summit was literally an agree to disagree thing where we didn't hear them talk. It just was a visual. We saw them sitting there in the Rose Garden or whatever. We see them, but we don't hear what they're saying. Nothing is concluded at the end. And I think at the end, the cop said he still thinks he was right, and vice versa. So to them, the accomplishment is, we got them to sit down and have a beer, which, again, the beer part is such a... God, there's so much symbolism. And it's so great that Trump doesn't drink beer or alcohol of any kind or drugs or cigarettes or anything, because that way he gets to skirt that whole issue. And when Hillary was drinking her beers, or now this most recent one where, Tim Walz was trying to go out hunting and couldn't operate the gun. And Kamala told us she had a Glock. It's just stop. Please just stop it. All this symbolism is so tiresome. And the thing with the beer, we're going to drink a beer. It's like, well, that's America. We agree or disagree. We drink a beer. No, that's not America. That's not the goal. If that's what you thought the goal was, and I got the feeling that's kind of what Obama thinks is the best possible result. You get together, disagree, have a beer. That's not getting us anywhere. What are you possibly talking about? So I don't think people like that see things that way have the gumption to actually go in and try to actually find some common ground. They just think the idea of expressing disparate views is the whole point. Now, another way of going about it, which I think is a Trump way, isn't so much to find common ground either, but it's not to paper it over with, all right, everyone settle down. Stylistically, at least, in terms of the way he runs. Of course, I have no idea how his back door, meetings go. I've never been there. But stylistically, he seems to want instead to just win completely. I won, you lost. Now that I'm right and you're wrong, then we can come to some agreement as to what to do about it. It perhaps includes mercy, compassion, etc. But first, somebody has to win conclusively. So I would imagine, and I'm just making this up. Never was asked about this, I don't think, but with the Gates officer thing, that unless the officer did something just egregious, which he didn't, the Trump side would probably be the cop was right, Gates is wrong. Okay, let's start with that. The guy sees you breaking into your own house. How's he supposed to know that that's what it is? The neighbor called it in. You're the one that got way too pissy about it. So the cop was right. Now that that's the case, the cop can apologize for the way it turned out, but not for being wrong, and they can shake hands. Something like that. But the common ground they would have come to is we both agree that the cop wasn't wrong. And, either side may not want to come to that conclusion, but at least it's a conclusion of a kind. And we can move on to the next thing. We're not left with leaving the meeting with the exact same grumbles that we had going in, having resolved nothing, except we shared a beer. It's like you're not moving forward with the subject. No deal was actually made. You're just moving papers around. And that's how I envision bureaucracy, the Kamala Harris vibe. It's just moving papers around the table. It's a very surface thing. And believe it or not, I say all that to say, I feel like that's really the core of why Trump won. People have a million reasons, demographics and race and blacks and gay and blah, blah, blah. I think fundamentally, and Lichtman has, to me, this one advantage, interestingly, where he was asked about this. He doesn't break things down by demographics. He looks at it like the voting public feels this way about, energy, about the economy, whatever. He doesn't theorize that if you're a black male, you feel differently about prices going up than you would if you were a transgender white woman or whatever, which in a way, makes sense. Why should that make any difference as to your feelings about energy prices? Either you're in favor or not in favor of them going up or down or scandal, whatever. Because what's implicit in the other view is that the way you react to scandal is different because you are this or that. Well, this group is used to scandal. This group's not used to scandal. Well, this group's normalized scandal. Well, this group react. Now you're wandering into the weeds where I don't think you can ever find your way back out. So the advantage of Lichtman is he just has these broad things. Now, he was wrong, which made me feel very good, as I was saying earlier, because it's just nice when a structure that is sort of unquestioned is wrong for once, because it shows you that anything is possible, and you should never become reliant on just everything will always be this way because it always was. No, it's different, and this is where I think they all got it wrong. I actually think that the reason Trump won, and of course you can overlay 1,000 different levels of analysis, but the thing that unites, and that's why I bring up Lichtman, the thing that applies to all demographics, I think, is the American vibe. Now, I think we forgot that. We're not Americans. Because American used to mean something. You're an American, which means if you're black, or you're white, or you're Asian, or you're Hispanic, or you're from the South, or the North, or the West, or the Midwest, you'd still all be the same insofar as being an American. So if that person from the Midwest, or from LA, or from New York, or from the South, or from Florida, or from Texas, is in Italy, an Italian will recognize that person as an American, regardless of their race, or the accent that they have, or this particular, specificities of their geographical blah, blah, blah. They'll just say, oh, that's an American. An American black guy, an American white guy, but still an American. What happened to the American thread, the part that makes us all the same? Well, what is that sameness? What is that similarity? And I think people now have taken that as the background. Yeah, we're American, whatever. But the real difference is that I'm transgender and you're not. You're oppressing me. You're conservative. You're a religious nut. You're a Satanist. You're an agnostic. You want an abortion. They divided it that way, and they've forgotten about the common underlying thing that we're all Americans. What about that? What is that? How does that manifest itself? How does that get exemplified and represented today? What is the modern version of all of us being an American? It isn't we all believe in putting our hands over our heart and saluting the flag. That isn't presently a commonly agreed upon thing like it used to be. Now that's kind of a right of center, patriot, America kind of thing people make fun of. I was going to get an American flag after this election. If I put an American flag on my house, people will think I voted for Trump because the American flag has come to represent right wing, or at least right of center, or at least moderate, certainly not left. You can't imagine the progressive leftist having an American flag. You can imagine them having a BLM flag, a gay flag, a transgender flag, a bondage flag, every other kind of flag, but not an American flag. So that tells us something right there about how we have stopped acknowledging and trying to strengthen that common thread. What is that common thread? So I don't know. That's a different video, different podcast, different recording. But I'll tell you what I think it was in this election. Whatever it is, that common American thing that we all do still have, it gets understood and expressed in certain ways that I think people recognize even if they can't put their finger on it. And the way it came out here, it's to sound weird, but I think it's true. It's that moving things around the desk, shuffling papers around, rather than getting something concrete done. I think the shuffling papers around kind of performative stuff is not the core of American. The core of American, I believe, one of the things that unites all of us is the American sensibility is roll your sleeves up and do it. We do have international gauges of productivity of different countries. We are the most productive. We're among the most productive. We work the most in this country. And some people think it's good, some think it's bad. But we have that. We work. We get things done. Now, you could say we're hamsters in a wheel and we're in a capitalist thing. Fine. You might be right. But it's a joke, to this point. It's so known you can make jokes about it. What's his name? I think it's Dana Carvey. And his stand-up was talking about how no Italians would ever go to the moon, for example. They're not going to work that hard. They would say, why should I go to the moon when I can sing to the moon? Have some wine. It's just a different culture. We are a very productivity-driven type, ambitious, capitalist-focused culture. We are. And so I think one of the common threads we have is rubber to the road, pragmatic, practical, get something done, let's get on with it. And I think that is one of the subtle things people don't give enough credit for that Trump represents. Forget politics, forget all of that, forget the policies. Trump's overall vibe his entire life has been, let me go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake up at 6:30 in the morning. More done, let's get more done. Energy. What the other side would call simple-minded solutions that I would say aren't simple-minded as much as they are elegant in their simplicity. So, for example, with pro wrestling, that's a very big thing, is you can overcomplicate it, add more and more layers, and you think you're smarter, but you're actually dumber because you're fucking it up. There's some story about, I think it was Jerry Jarrett, that was hired by somebody in Texas to help them improve their Fed. And he sat them down, and the first thing he said to them is, let me dumb you down. Okay? There's a good guy, there's a bad guy. The bad guy is a dragon. The good guy fights the dragon, the monster, and he wins in the end. Thank you, good night. That's what pro wrestling is. There's nothing else to talk about. And when you go with a simple formula, it's effective and you're smart for doing it. If you overcomplicate it, you think you're smart, you can work yourself into a shoot, brother, and think, that you really just come up with it. But actually, you're fucking up the formula. It's shine, heat, come back, finish. Okay? That's just what it is. Or shine, heat, come back, big heat, big comeback. It's the same basic elements. And when you try to add 27 other elements, you're not improving things. You're making them worse. And I think one of the things people like about Trump is the idea that he seems to be simple. And again, I don't mean it as an insult. I mean clear. And you can get what he's talking about. These guys over here are good. These guys are bad. Let's make them broke so they won't have any money to do bad things with. People are coming illegally into the country across this border. We'll put up a wall, then they can't walk. They can't walk through a wall. Problem solved. Next subject. And then people will get in the weeds. Well, you can get a letter. Well, the most overstays are visa. For God's sakes, the point is, address what you can with the broad, simple things first. At least get the low-hanging fruit first. At least, for example, in deportation, people will say, are you going to tear families apart? Are you going to tear families apart? Are you going to tear families apart? What if someone's married and the second generation, their grandma's been here 30 years? Obviously, you start by deporting criminal gangs. I mean, come on. That's odd. And that, realistically, it's all we're going to have time to do anyway. But you can't even get energy up to talk about that subject if you are instead AOCing it and thinking we need more judges. We need more ways to legalize people. Legalizing people should not be your focus. Your focus should be get people out or keep them from coming in that are bad people. Not, well, you can't call people bad because of their ethnicity. That is not the focus you should be focusing on. Of course you shouldn't, but that's not the point. The point is there are bad people that exist in the world. When we see them coming across the border with "fuck America" written across their forehead, you deport that person. You don't let them in. This is not complicated. We can at least agree on that part. But we're shuffling papers around instead on the other side and arguing about, well, how does that appear? And is that right? And is that correct? And what about this law? And is it asylum? And did they go to an asylum area? And like, stop trying to fuck it up just for the sake of being obstructionist or politically correct or tone deaf or just TDS or just stupid or kind. You know, I've heard Christians say, my religion tells me to be kind to the stranger. No, it doesn't. Not to the country. That's your personal thing. You go do that. But the Bible has nothing to say about what the United States should do about the illegal immigration issue at the border. It just doesn't, okay? That's not what the Bible is for. You're making a category error. And don't even apply that over here. It's an irrelevancy. Obviously, you can't have a country without borders. He said that, and people thought, wow, that's profound. No, it's not. It's obvious. But it needs to be said because nobody else will say the obvious thing. So the common American thread, I think, for us is we like things to be simple, straightforward, pragmatic, and results-oriented. And the other side comes across like a DMV bureaucrat that just keeps sliding papers around and never actually achieves anything, even points in the direction of achieving anything, and just wants to give speeches, look a certain way, present things a certain way, and just keep shuffling papers around. And I think that's why he won, because he comes across like, I want to do something, and the other side comes across like, we want to present. We want to look presidential. We want to have dignity. We want to have justice for all. We want to have an opportunity for... These are just... And those things are fine. Everybody wants justice and opportunity. But you're not explaining what you mean. He wants to cut taxes. He wants to cut regulations. Things that you can understand. The other side is basically saying, we want to create an opportunity economy. What the hell does that even mean? It was never even explained. And when you asked for an explanation, you got things like, well, let me begin with this. I was raised in a middle-class family, and I think everyone should be able to... what I love about this country is the ambition and the drive and the dreams, and we still have a chance that... Please stop Obama-ing me. Obama did that, speechify, but he did it well. Actually, it sounded like something you could write down and, sketch into a stone tablet, and it'll be a memorable... remember this great speech this man gave thousands of years ago. She's the Temu version. She's the Wish version of that kind of thing. She looks like she's trying to sound profound, but it's just word salad. And it's just a platitude after platitude without any elegance or rhyme or rhythm or flavor or inspiration or anything, because it's obviously somebody who's just going through the motions. So that's, I think, the big thing that happened this election. One guy seems authentic. Even if you think he's authentically wicked or authentically scandalous or authentically sexually predator or authentically a liar or authentically a criminal or whatever, there's at least authentic something. It's an actual human over there, which is ironic because a billionaire typically should be the elitist and nobody can relate to. I remember when Forbes ran and he came across like this bizarre autistic kid that was still with his bulged out eyes. I thought, is he okay? Totally unrelatable. Like he never had any, like he grew up in the house and was homeschooled and never met any friends or anything. Trump is not like that. He's always come off as a poor white trash, blue collar type of guy who happens to be a billionaire. Now maybe that's a front, whatever, but that's the flavor you get. You get the sense, and that's why the garbage truck, the McDonald's, he also leans into that. And the other side just presented us with somebody who would transparently step into another person's role 70 days earlier, 100 days earlier, and just go through the motions and move papers around. And then towards the end, become unhinged, screaming at him, calling him unhinged. And that didn't work well. Because now you're not even, it's like pro wrestling when it doesn't work. When you guys start to, I always joke and say, stop all that wrestling. When you start wrestling each other in these elaborate, routines, you've stopped taking us into consideration, the audience. We could leave, you wouldn't even know we left. You just, enmeshed in each other without any performative purpose to let us in on it. And that's what Cheetah, when she went apeshit for he's out of his mind, he's deranged, he's unbalanced. You're so obsessed at screaming at him, you're not looking at me telling me what you're going to do for me. You're just telling me I'm not him. Well, then get married or something. You guys are so completely screaming it. But that's the thing. He didn't take that bait. He didn't spend all of his rallies screaming at her. She spent all of her rallies ending it screaming at him. Now, he, tipped his hat to that. He did the funny, you're fired, come on, get out, But that's just a cute little, piece of meat you throw out that's fun. He didn't spend the whole time talking about, she should never, ever behind the seal of the President of the United States. All press is good press. She's always understood that. And she decided to just rail against him. And that the way she would get in is that he's Hitler and a fascist. He's Hitler and a fascist. He's Hitler and a fascist. Now, the thing that otherwise would seem to be decent or even admirable, a peaceful transition of power, ends up being an indictment of her, honestly. Because don't you have a moral obligation not to peacefully transition power over to somebody that you have said full-throatedly is a fascist, a dictator, and Hitler? It'd be different if you said, oh man, this guy's a fascist, dictator, Hitler. Oh, well, we're stuck because we have to transition power because that's a system. But no, she didn't say it like that. She was proud of it. Because, of course, she's trying to, once again, implicitly, slick attack him. I'm going to transition power peacefully, unlike you-know-who. So that lets us know everything you say is just a tactic. If you really believed he was a fascist dictator, you would have a moral obligation not to transfer power to a dictator. If you thought he was Hitler, you can go back in time. Wouldn't you not transfer power to Hitler if you know he's Hitler? And she didn't say he's kind of Hitlerian. She said literally calling him a fascist, a dictator, and he'll never release power, and he'll stay the president forever. Well, then you should have a moral obligation that supersedes your oath of the Constitution not to give a dictator a fascist power. But they're going to do it because they don't really mean it, which again gives the lie to the fact that all you were doing was really saying he's stylistically fascist. He's stylistically dictatorish. He has a Hitlerish vibe. That's not a thing to run on. Who cares? And now you've revealed yourself in trying to attack him once again, even in the concession speech, even after you've lost, you're still attacking him by doing the I'm going to transition, unlike you-know-who, wink, wink. Still attacking, even in his speech is supposed to be about concession and conceding and being, generous. In so far as you're attacking him by pounding your chest about how you're going to transition peacefully, you inadvertently give yourself away as a liar because you wouldn't be doing that if you really believed he was Hitler, which proves you don't believe that, and he didn't just change. It means that you never believed it, which means the entire exercise was nothing but a let's try the Hitler card and see what happens. Well, you tried it, it didn't work, and now at the end, you have to underline your inauthenticity by peacefully transitioning power to the guy that you think will never give it up. And it's not because you have some great oath of the Constitution. It's because you never believed it. And the chef's kiss and the whole thing is that in her role as a VP, she has to certify his win. And that, my friends, is a complete win in every way for the Donald. And what I'm hoping, from what I've seen already, is that some people will eventually, it takes them a long time to come around, maybe because those of us that, work at home can spend more time into this, and the lower information people that are out there living their lives, maybe it takes them longer to catch up to these things. Bit by bit, maybe they will catch on to the idea that he's not Satan and he's not Hitler. And they will start to put their arms down, which is what you want. That's why he needed to win the popular vote in a landslide, and he won state governorships. They won the state houses. They won the House, the Senate, the electoral in a landslide, and the popular. Had to win everything in order, kind of like with the military, where you say you have peace through strength. Maybe we'll have peace, political peace, partisan peace, through his strength, through having won so handily, that allows the far left to go farther left and be more marginalized, and they can scream way over there in a corner where nobody listens to them. But people that want to get things done, like Van Jones, who's a leftist who, completely, he cries every time that Trump wins, and he derides him, and then in between, they work together on the First Step Act or on the getting people out of jail. Maybe those people now are starting to come around and will be like, well, all right, he's a president, let's see what we can do to work together. And bit by bit, they'll catch on to the fact that he's actually the same Trump he was in Home Alone 2. He's always been the same person. He was saying back then it was Japan, Japan, Japan eating our lunch. Now he's saying it's China, China, China. The lunatics will say it's because he's always had an anti-Asian xenophobic. No. No. It's because he doesn't have a sensitivity to being afraid to be called xenophobic. That's what they're picking up on, that they incorrectly identify as xenophobia. It's his lack of care. It's the fact that he'll just say, that's a virus from China. No, you can't say that. Well, why not? It's from China. No, you can't keep saying that. Anti-Asian hate crimes are going to go up. What? I don't think he thinks along those lines. I don't think his goal is to increase hate crimes. But he's also not going to not talk that way to avoid hate crimes either. Because the truth is, it's the China virus. And let the chips fall where they may. That's the truth. It's called the China virus. And that lack of walking on eggshells that he has is, I think, that which they misidentify as an active hatred of other whatevers, genders, races, nationalities, orientations, when it's really that he doesn't give a shit one way or the other. And I wouldn't even call it being tone deaf, because tone deaf means you don't know any better. You don't know what you're saying. He knows. He doesn't care. Because to him, how else am I supposed to convey the point I'm trying to make? That the virus came from China. I'm not going to dance and create all kinds of other names for it. That's what it is. And that kind of person that's full-throated, genuine, real, says what he thinks, tries to get actual things done, is a version of a person that perhaps is generationally so different that many people just misidentify it as, filled with hatred and racism. And I can understand it. I grew up on Sam Kinison, Dice, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, and Lisa Lampanelli even. I've played some of that comedy for friends of mine that are younger. And after a couple of polite chuckles, the face just goes flat, and they're kind of scared and confused because that's offensive. So what? It's supposed to be offensive. That's why it's funny. But the generational difference is so wide that they think you must hate people. No, I love people. That's why I'm insulting them. And that's just, to me, a Generation X kind of a thing to do. I saw a great example of this on some Facebook thing. Let's see if I can't fuck this up, where they had a different example of how each generation would respond to a question. Do I look fat? And one generation's like, oh no, we would never fat shame. Other generation says, no, you're beautiful, you look beautiful. And the Gen X would say, I know 5 fat people, and you're 4 of the 5. It's like, I love you, that's why I'm insulting you. It's funny. It's presumed, it's obvious, the assumption is, that's why I'm even doing this, because we have an inherent bond that doesn't need to be questioned. That, to me, is what American is. That kind of common sense, simple, pragmatic thing. And the opposite of it is moving papers around, giving a bunch of flowery speeches that mean nothing, and basically acting like, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, going, no, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain while I'm looking at him. And I thought that was the greatest part of that movie is after they see him, he still keeps moving the lever to cause the wizard to say, don't look at that man behind the curtain. And that, I think, is a lot of how our politicians have treated us. They want us to just enjoy the pomp and circumstance and don't pay attention to whether or not we do anything or don't do anything, or because what we're about is civility and not offending anybody. And they use words like inclusivity, being inclusive, to turn that into a value. And maybe there are some people that really, feel that way. But Trump, I think, is the kind of person that achieves inclusiveness through something else, like it's a side effect. It's like success. If we're all successful, then we're inherently inclusive. Not because we made a list of who needs to be included. It's because if you raise the tide, all boats go up. It's that point of view. Now, how to achieve it, policy, well, you can debate that. That's fine. But at the very, very least, I have to believe that you're trying to want to do that you want to do that, rather than just you want to be in power, or you're into DEI stuff where it's like, I need representation. We need someone to be a president that looks this way. So then your only goal is that for its own sake. And we can't discuss fracking or the Kurds or Ukraine or the border or regulations or taxes or the IRS or OSHA or any of the things that should matter, because all you want is this kind of paper moving around visual representational thing, which to me is a whole other separate field that has nothing to do with the subject at hand. It's not the meat of the matter, it's the sizzle. And, Trump can do sizzle. I think using Hulk Hogan was one of the most brilliant things ever. It symbolizes something. And all you can do with that is go, oh, that's so cornball. Well, if you want a cornball Americana, knock yourself out. But where else would you use it except in a political ad? That's the whole entire point. He's hugging the American flag. When he first ran, he literally ran on that, I love America. It's the kind of simple thought that would only occur to a non-politician. I know what I'll do. I'll run and I'll say I love America because I do love America. And anybody would say, what kind of policy, what kind of platform is that? All the politicians love America, but they never say it. That's the funny thing. You never actually heard them talk a lot about it. They might say it at the end, God bless America, but they didn't talk about it again and again, America, 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 because it started to become kind of a right-wing, they would always call it, it's a whistle, it's a dog whistle. If you say you love America, it means you're really trying to bring out the Klan. I always find some way to not have this full-throated American love. So what they do, okay, so he loves America. What's the opposite of that? Let's call him a Russian agent. The shamelessness, because all they're about is tactic. How do we take him down and retain power? Now, you feel ends justify the means. How do we take him down and retain power so that we can continue doing these good things for the public? Fine. You could approach the end justify the means thing. But that's not why they're doing it. They've lost track of what the original reason even was, if they ever knew what it was. At this point, when you're in power for 40 years, it's just for the purpose of retaining power. He's a disruptor, comes in with a specific agenda, writes it down. I want to do this, 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 and this. He keeps all of his promises, accomplishes it, and he's repaid with a bullet. So That, I think, is the lesson that nobody will pick up on, which is that he's about all of us being American and bonding on that, not on just moving papers around and saying anodyne things without disrupting anything, without promising anything specific, or promising kind of both things to both sides, and not because you're savvy and can make a deal, but because you just want to keep it. Everyone just calm down. Everyone just calm down. That's not governing. And I think we've all had a lot of that for years, and we're sick of it. And so he comes along and says, our leaders are stupid people. We're getting ripped off. Anybody can relate to that. I'm going through that right now. Anybody can relate to that contractor ripped me off. I understand that. That I can relate to. But when someone says instead, we need an opportunity economy where everyone can chase their dreams. What does that even mean? What is the policy form that takes? It just sounds like a platitude, because it probably is. And it probably will, culminate in, I have this great idea for a $47 tax credit. What? What am I supposed to do with that? Because it sounds good. You could label it something. Trump has the vibe of being a let's do something person. And now, hopefully, they'll allow him to try to do those things. And then what they can do is try to include their agenda with his and say, well, hey, if you're going to do this and this and this, not for pork, but for a real actual result, RFK Jr., the most august name in being Democrats, Kennedy comes to him and says, I want to make America healthy again. What's he going to oppose that? He criticized RFK at the beginning when he thought that was going to be his enemy. But as soon as he offered something substantive and saw an advantage as well, he's willing to work that way across. This whole coalition is so broad. The coalition here of different people that have different levels of skill and experience that can achieve in things and produce results, like the number one podcaster, like the richest man in the world, like the rocket scientist, expert on health, RFK Jr. The other side's idea of a coalition is, look, we have a illegal immigrant, gay, midget, trans person, and then we have a straight guy, the old white guy, and then we have that's our version of a coalition. We have all these people that are different racially or sexual orientation. That's not a series of different people that are different in terms of their accomplishments. Those are just demographics. What am I supposed to do with that? Well, they literally will say, well, this person has a different lived experience. That's what they bring to the table. Well, every human being has a different lived experience. So who cares? What exactly is the lived experienced version, the lived experience version of an African American paying too much for gas at the gas station versus the lived experience of a lesbian paying too much for gas? There's no difference. They're paying too much for gas. There is no lesbian version of gas. That's not, you break things up by the dumbest things, and you don't think about the common thread, which is, man, prices are high, let's lower them. That's what Trump does. You know why? Because he's that dumb. He's so simple-minded. He just thinks about stuff like, I don't know, maybe the road should be paved, infrastructure should be good, prices should be lower, other countries should pay their fair share, we should take care of our seniors and not cut Social Security, not tax that. Just the common sense, simple stuff. When the other folks are trying to align and realign and group and regroup their visual Benetton ad representation of, this is a representation of America, which is fine for a photo shoot. But I think we finally got to the point where we'd like to get something accomplished. And last time we had the best unemployment numbers and low inflation and no new wars and the border was under control. And I think people like those things. And hopefully we'll be able to go back to that. The only actual issue, if you want to have an issue, was abortion, which he saved from federal interference because he took it indirectly by Supreme Court, nomination. out of the federal government, which means now it's not a federal issue. So a president couldn't do a federal ban even if they wanted to, because it's not a federal issue. He should be thanked for that. But of course, people looked at it like he took away a woman's right to choose. It's not the case. He just put it back to the states and made it not a federal issue. Other than that, that's at least an issue you could debate and discuss. Other than that, they decided to have any issues. All they had was fascist. Well, why are you calling him a fascist? Well, because he quotes fascists. So what? There's many things fascists have said that are really great quotes. Doesn't mean that I'm a fascist. So it's stupid. I don't think people really meant it. And now by giving a peaceful transition of power to somebody that you know is Hitler, you've proven that you don't know he's Hitler. You never thought he was Hitler. And you just said that to try to win, which actually makes you a horrible person, that you're willing to put someone's life in danger who already got shot by continuing to call them a threat to democracy and a fascist when you don't even believe it, which is proven by the transition you're about to do peacefully. If you believed it, I could at least say, well, it's your convictions. It was all just a tactical thing. The moment she lost, I called the dictator to wish him well and concede. What? Actually, you would be morally bound to launch an insurrection now if you're on that side and you believed it, but you don't. You're fake, and you're just a paper pusher, and you've revealed yourself as such. And now we have Trump 2.0, the best feature of which, to me, and I'm the biggest Trump guy you can think of, is that he only has one term. Because that means, hopefully now, he'll kick out the door jams and just be like, I'm going to do what I think is right and good, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says or does, because donors and blah, 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 he'll have some allegiance to want to help the RNC and people down ballot and think of the future for Vance. But at the end of the day, he's an 80-year-old man who's going to just pretty much say, this is what I think my legacy should be. Doesn't have to worry about re-election concerns. I think it's going to be the best time in modern American history. Let's go.